For more than 150 years, Mayo Clinic has been recognized as the worldwide leader in healthcare, known for providing premier patient care, medical education, and research. With 3 campuses and one vision to transform healthcare, Mayo Clinic offers a truly unique environment. We remain strongly positioned to further accelerate healthcare delivery while staying true to our primary value: the needs of the patient comes first. We look forward to a continual relationship with NACI, strengthening our collective voices and the healthcare profession. Have a great conference.
Hello, my name is Brandon Batiste, one of the NACI Education co-chairs. Our moderator for this session, Black Faces in White Spaces, Preserving the Mental Health of Black Professionals, is Mr. Darren Brownlee. Mr. Darren Brownlee is a Senior Division Chair of Education at the Mayo Clinic of Florida. He earned his Master's of Health Administration from Hofstra University and is completing his doctorate in Public Health and Health Policy and Management at the Johns Hopkins University. His research interests include health equity, health policy, and management. In 2012, Darren began his career in Baltimore, Maryland with the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Serving in many capacities, he led various functions within the Department of Surgery and Department of Medicine, managed chairman's office activities, and led hospital and system-wide equity initiatives. In October of 2018, Darren transitioned to Jacksonville, Florida as an operations administrator for dermatology, pulmonology, allergy, sleep medicine, and respiratory services, and as a secretary of the Operations of Coordinating Group. In May of 2021, Darren stepped into his current role of Senior Division Chair of Education. In addition to his profession, Darren is a past chapter president and previous board member of the National Association of Health Services Executives. Darren is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health Leader alum, a group composed of health leaders from all sectors working towards collaborative solutions that address health inequities while moving communities and organizations toward a culture of health, and a former United Way Northeast Florida Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Darren Brownlee.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Brandon. And everybody, welcome back to this educational session entitled Black Faces in White Spaces, Preserving the Mental Health of Black Professionals. As we go through the objectives, note that we are here to discuss how Black professionals can develop and maintain an individual and/or corporate Black identity that promotes equity while maintaining job security. Additionally, we will be discussing methods and resources and our experiences navigating white spaces while promoting self-preservation, maintaining cultural norms, and creating balance. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Within this virtual application, we do have a question and answer tab. Please feel free to type in there any questions that you have, and we will try to fill them during our question and answer session. Also, please be mindful that the question and answer tab is a little bit different than the personal chat tab, so make sure you differentiate between the two. 2 other small housekeeping items. Within this venue, the bathroom is located that way, whichever way your bathroom is located. And more importantly, lunch will not be provided as lunch is really at your own discretion. Without further ado, I do have the honor of introducing our first speaker, goes by the name of Dr. Lauren Powell. Recently named among Fortune's 40 under 40 in healthcare, Dr. Lauren Powell is the president and CEO of the Equitas LLC and concurrently serves as the vice president, U.S. Health, Equity, and Community Wellness for Takeda Pharmaceuticals. In this role, she spearheads efforts to drive health equity through building trust and investing in building generational community wellness in diverse, under-resourced communities across the U.S. For more than a decade, Dr. Powell has been immersed in broad and progressive leadership positions where she's been unapologetically outspoken about racial injustices and health inequities. Her professional and personal experiences spearheading equity efforts in healthcare, state government, academia, and public health make her a nationally sought-after leader, speaker, and consultant on all things health equity. Formerly the Director of Health Equity for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Dr. Powell was the youngest Black woman and the first with a PhD to serve in this powerful role, where she led statewide strategic plans and initiatives towards pushing Virginia's 8.5 million residents closer to health equity. Dr. Powell has an established track record as a community engaged social epidemiologist with doctoral training on leveraging data for equity. She earned a master's in public administration at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and a doctor of philosophy in clinical and population health research at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. Dr. Powell deeply values mentorship and community engagement. She actively seeks opportunities to help mold and encourage the next generation of leaders in health equity. Prior to her graduate school matriculation, she held positions coordinating clinical research studies at a number of prestigious medical institutions, including the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Public Health, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and the National Cancer Institute and National Institutes of Health. Dr. Powell has been featured on several national and international news sources and outlets, including Marie Claire, Politico, The Guardian, Huffington Post, NPR, BBC, CNBC, PBS, NewsHour, Now This, Newsy, and Cheddar. I don't know about you out there, but I feel smarter just by reading all of her accomplishments. Without that, I would turn the mic over to Dr. Powell as she gives her first presentation.
Well, thank you, Darren, and thank you to the NACI team for the opportunity to be a part of this very important conversation today. I appreciate the genuine and also lengthy introduction. Thank you so much, Darren, for that. I'm going to open with a quote that I feel like resonates with this topic. In 1961, when James Baldwin was asked by a radio host about the experience of being Black in America, he said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. And I feel that this quote resonates with this session so much because sometimes to be the only Black face in a white space, and to be relatively conscious, might I add, is to be in a rage almost all the time. My personal experience, which you've heard a little bit about, has led me to some roles and some places where I have not only been the first of my kind in a role or first role of its kind in an organization, but have often been the only Black person in a room, have often been the only Black woman at a table, and have often felt the weight of what it feels like to be conscious and almost in a rage almost all the time. I think that many of us on this call navigate lots of different spaces, lots of different healthcare spaces and healthcare adjacent spaces that put us in positions where we are often the only one, or we are amongst a handful of diversity in the room. And unfortunately, what I feel like has happened in a lot of our workplaces is that tokenism has been, I think, mistaken as diversity. So having just a couple of people of color, a couple of Black leaders in positions of power sometimes have led organizations to think that they are diverse and inclusive when in fact they're only exhibiting tokenism. I think what I want to talk about in my short and brief comments, and that I'm looking forward to hearing from Dr. Peoples, is about the public health implications of this. My background and my position and everything I focused on professionally has been about health equity. That's really the intersection of racism in healthcare, and really working to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to attain their highest potential of health, that we are working towards equity, which is very different from equality, right? That we know that equity is giving people and giving communities what they need in order to live their healthiest and well life. But equality is giving everyone the same thing. And so my career has been focused on health equity, and I can't help but think about not only the personal experiences I have had, but what the literature and what the data shows us about the ways that facing racism and facing discrimination, being the only Black face in a white space, whatever it may be it education or be it in your daily role or be it in your neighborhood, that has public health implications. one of the concepts that I studied and actually researched and published on is racial hypervigilance. That is essentially merely the anticipation of a racist encounter we know has systemic impacts on our health. So whether or not the racist encounter actually happens, we know that just anticipating that you will encounter a moment that reminds you that you are not of the dominant culture, a moment that reminds you that you are other, a moment that reminds you that you are the Black face in a white space, just anticipating the fact that that can happen, let alone whether it happens or not, has implications on stress levels, has implications on cortisol levels that we may think are even correlated with weight gain and obesity sometimes in the Black community, has implications on cardiovascular health, and then has implications on our mental health and our ability to concentrate and our stability mentally. A couple of other syndromes and concepts that are also associated with this. Sojourner syndrome, which is specifically talks about Black women and the multiple identities that Black women have to hold and have to carry, and what that does as a stressor to the body. John Henryism, which we remember the folk tale of John Henry and how he was tasked with building a railroad and trying to work against time, but work also against like the industry, work against like an actual train that was coming. And the implications of that in real life are that John Henryism is associated with Black men in particular. And the thought that somehow if we overwork, if we work ourselves to the bone, if we work ourselves to the brink, that somehow we will be better for it. But in reality, there is a trade-off. There's a trade-off in our health. And that there are studies that have correlated John Henryism with hypertension, with higher blood pressure, with other chronic diseases and chronic illnesses, because that framework and that thinking of overproduction, which is one that is deeply rooted in slavery and deeply rooted in a capitalist structure that we all have to navigate. But that framework, it does have a cost to it. And then finally, weathering. Weathering is a concept that is really mostly correlated with Black women. And we often talk about weathering in the sense of maternal mortality, that the wear and tear on being both Black and a woman, which is something I experience every day, that being in those intersections and the intersectionality, which we know Kimberly Crenshaw coined, enforces us to think about not only the identity of being Black or being a woman or being of another marginalized identity separately, but that we must think of them together because we exist as one whole person with one whole identity in society. And that weathering challenges us to think about the wear and tear, literally the wear and tear on the body, the wear and tear on the mind and the soul of constantly having to navigate the intersection of being Black and being a woman, and what that does to not only our mental health and well-being, but to our bodies. And so I want to just underscore that there are public health implications to being the Black face or the only Black face in a white space. But I also want to leave you with a bit of hope in the sense that I do think there are ways that we can push through this. I am, very excited and very happy to see lots of different roles that are popping up in different organizations, such as mine, working on health equity in pharma, which is a very new space to be in. I'm also excited to see the revolution and the evolution of the ways self-care are being talked about much more front and center and are being prioritized, specifically in the Black community, in a community in which we haven't openly always talked about mental health, and one in which I know I see my parents and see my grandparents like work themselves almost literally to death. And so I'm heartened to see that there are some changes in the conversations that are happening. And I think we push through by recognizing that we are not machines, right? John Henryism challenges us to see that like we cannot operate as machines because we are not machines, and that we are human, and that embracing our humanity challenges us to push back on any thoughts that would frame us as machines and frame us as being able to only, our only value being connected to output somehow. That I think we can push through by thinking not only of ourselves and our roles, but thinking about leaving the door cracked for those who should come after us, making sure that we are creating the atmosphere that challenges why are there not more Black faces in this space? If it's not something that leadership will actually take the helm on changing, what can I do in my position to do so? And I look forward to sharing some additional examples of that. I will step back now, and I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Peoples' comments and having a robust discussion with the rest of the audience. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
The pleasure is truly ours, and thank you once again, Dr. Powell. What we're going to do is get the introduction now to Dr. Peoples. After that, we will have question and answer guided by then a meditation in which we are, or a mindful exercise in which we will have also led by Dr. Peoples. So without further ado, Dr. Reba Peoples is a board certified psychiatrist, functional medicine practitioner, and founder of Amara Health and Wellness. She is a sought after speaker and educator who understands the transformative power of connection to community and an awareness and understanding of cultural value systems and health and helping individuals and communities carve out a path to wellness. Her unique and engaging keynotes, workshops, and lectures expertly weave an understanding of how history, culture, and neuroscience collectively shape our world view and can be used as a catalyst for individual and societal transformation. After helping hundreds of individuals transform their emotional health, as a clinician in private practice, Dr. Peoples is now focused on making her unique wellness offerings available to a broader audience through engaging immersive experiences, workshops, and retreats. Her work with individuals and communities is informed by a SMART wellness framework that is healing-centered, experiential, and rooted in liberation. This approach invites cultural wisdom, spirituality, and civic action into the collective experience of healing racialized trauma. I let alone will say in one conversation I've had with Dr. Peoples, not only has she inspired me to get a plant, which I bought ASAP, but more importantly, she inspired me to certainly follow up and book an appointment with her ASAP, because we definitely need a type of mental healing, wellness, and just mental health guidance in many ways. So without further ado, I will turn it over to that expert, Dr. Peoples.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Dr. Powell. Thank you, Nasi, for the opportunity to be in community with you all today. I am very much looking forward to today's discussion. Now, Viktor Frankl once wrote that the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And the understanding of that phrase came full circle for me back in 2013 after nearly fainting during the middle of a busy clinic day. As I picked myself up off the floor of my office, my initial reaction was a mixture of fear and annoyance that my body would dare to betray me when I was booked solid for 2 months, had patients that needed me, and I simply didn't have time to be sick. It was in that moment that I realized that everything that I thought I knew to be true about what it means to be successful was a lie. And those lies were quite literally making me sick. And perhaps the more shocking revelation was that I had been passing those same lies to my patients without even recognizing it. And ever since that realization, I've dedicated my professional career to understanding how to navigate wellness in spite of the systems, structures, and cultural norms that often stop us from loving all of who we are, living fearlessly and authentically, and setting healthy boundaries that allow us to cultivate internal calm, even in the midst of external chaos. Most people don't realize that we need to understand the social, historical, and biological context of what it means to be well in our society in order to understand how some of the ways that we navigate through the world are actually making us ill. We see this manifested in things like hustle culture that encourages a rise and grind philosophy that discourages sleep and encourages an always on, always accessible lifestyle. We also see this in the opposite extreme, through the cult of toxic positivity that encourages self-care through a lens of personal resilience and gratitude alone, while completely ignoring the larger cultural and systemic factors that directly contribute to things like burnout and dissatisfaction. For members of groups who have historically been denied equal access to power and opportunity, we must also understand those social, historical, and biological contexts of oppression and inequality in order to understand how to overcome it. And this is equally important for our co-conspirators who are also committed to creating a just and fair society that works equally well for all of us. So how do we do this? Now, in addition to my clinical practice as a psychiatrist, I'm also an emotional liberation strategist who specializes in helping high achievers learn to let go of the programs, patterns, and behaviors that no longer serve our growth or well-being so that we can live lives with more meaning, purpose, and impact. Emotional liberation means different things to different people, but ultimately it means being able to navigate the world in a way that's in alignment with our highest values. It means being able to step into the role of being architects of our own lives and masters of our own destiny. It means daring to thrive in spite of every external circumstance telling us that we shouldn't. It also means choosing to love ourselves even when the world doesn't love us back. As people of African descent, we navigate a complex and unique set of challenges, both in and out of the workplace. And many of these challenges are often born out of a cultural mismatch between the ideology, ethos, and worldview of our families of origin and those of American society at large. American sociologist Ruth Hill Useem coined the term third culture to describe the experience of children of immigrants who have spent a significant portion of their formative years outside of their parents' culture. So these individuals tend to mix and match aspects of their birth culture with their adopted culture to create a unique culture of their own, a third culture. Many of these children describe a sense of being in cultural limbo because they're too American to truly feel at home in their countries of origin and too foreign to feel truly at home in America. So they often feel the need to wear many different masks, omitting parts of themselves or their story to make their identity more palatable for others. And this feeling of being rootless and out of place, both in their ancestral home and in the United States, is often prevalent even when they were actually born and raised in the United States. So how is that relevant to us here today? For those of us who are descendants of enslaved Africans, our enslaved ancestors found themselves forcibly immersed into a culture whose ideology, values, and worldview were in complete opposition to their traditional ways of being. And navigating this cultural mismatch necessitated creation of a new culture and identity that simultaneously allowed them to function in the strange new culture of America while covertly finding ways to preserve their traditional African values, customs, and traditions. And many of those vestiges of culture still persist today. And for descendants of enslaved Africans who've managed to retain many of those core vestiges of the traditional African value system of our ancestors, navigating the tightrope of conflicting cultural values is often mentally and spiritually exhausting. And much like the third culture kids described by Ruth Hill Useem, American descendants of enslaved Africans often find themselves feeling like strangers in a strange land. So how does this show up? Cultural mismatch usually has the greatest impact on individuals who occupy less privileged positions in systems and structures. Because individual achievement is positively influenced by a perceived cultural fit between the individual's values and the values of the system in which he or she must operate, the onus is generally placed on the person with less power to learn how to adapt to the dominant cultural norms in order to gain acceptance and to succeed in the dominant culture. So unsurprisingly, this can represent an area of significant distress for individuals who must navigate through structures that are informed by underlying cultural values that are very different than their own. So although individuals from traditionally underrepresented groups may have a solid sense of their cultural identity, they also recognize that in certain environments, there are inherent risks in bringing their full selves to work. Individuals who feel pressure to make sure that their language, behavior, appearance fit with their company's culture may struggle with where to draw the line with regard to how much of themselves they're willing to compromise. So in spite of their efforts to blend in at work, they still find themselves in the unusual position of being invisible yet hypervisible at the same time. And rather than being free to focus on the work at hand, those who are in work environments where they're compelled to code switch are often preoccupied with fears of not being taken seriously, if unable to live up to an often impossible self-imposed ideal. So those fears stifle creativity, they limit the willingness to take risks. And those fears really aren't irrational. We know that confirmation bias often ensures that non-privileged people aren't afforded the same room for grace as their privileged counterparts. So rather than offering up their new and innovative ideas, code switchers may tone down their suggestions in favor of safer options. They know too well that their mistakes may not be viewed as opportunities for growth, but as potential proof of incompetence. So anxiety and perfectionism become frequent struggles. So when we think about strategies for coping, there are a few pointers that I recommend to my patients and clients. The first pointer is to deliberately seek out community. Many of us often find ourselves in situations where we're either the first and or only person who looks like us in our departments or organizations at large. It's important to combat feelings of isolation by developing a network of professional peers who share a similar identity. So affinity groups, professional organizations like this one can offer valuable insights, information, and opportunities that may not be readily shared by other coworkers. A second pointer is to seek out sponsors in addition to mentors. This is extremely important. While mentors offer guidance and advice, sponsors actually open doors by providing key introductions, referring opportunities, and advocating on your behalf. The third pointer is to invest in self-care as a way to combat the physical impact of toxic stress. And as Dr. Powell mentioned, we know that toxic stress can impact all aspects of wellness, even down to the metabolic level. So research by Arlene Geronimos, for example, indicates that Black women experience accelerated aging as a direct result of toxic stress. So when we look at telomere lengths, this translates to Black women aging an average of 7.5 years faster than white women. So caring for ourselves really isn't a small matter. And the framework that I use in my practice is a SMART wellness framework that emphasizes the modifiable lifestyles factors that influence wellness. Lastly, it's important to remember that your value isn't determined by your job. Because Western values tend to prioritize external measures of achievement as validation of self-worth, it can become very easy to internalize those values if you don't have a clear sense of identity, meaning, and purpose that isn't solely tied to the work that you do. So liberation to me means surrounding myself with loved ones, friends, and family who see me for exactly who I am and love me without judgment or pretense. It means choosing to nourish my body with real food. It means learning how to recognize toxic people, places, and situations and making a deliberate choice to limit my exposure. It means setting boundaries that honor my well-being. And as Lisa Nichols has so eloquently stated, it means being willing to choose to be my own rescue, even at the risk of your approval. So the path toward achieving liberation begins with recognizing that freedom always comes at a price, but we have to value ourselves enough to be willing to make the investment. Thank you.
I'm just snapping here. I mean, you gave me my Zen right now, Dr. Peoples. Thank you so much for the wisdom. Likewise with Dr. Powell, thank you so much for the wisdom. We have a great opportunity now to open it up to the Q&A session, which we will fill some questions if people have them from the group chat or the text box, as well as some moderated questions I would like to ask myself. Dr. Peoples, as you just had the floor and you really ended with just great ways in which you're protecting your emotional health, what advice or what suggestions would you give other Black professionals to transform their emotional health?
Well, I think one of the major pieces of advice that I would have is to really shift from thinking about wellness in terms of being sick. So I think that our current healthcare system is structured around illness. So you have to have a diagnostic code to qualify for reimbursement. And once that code is attached to your medical record, there are very real implications for things like, disability insurance premiums, qualification for life insurance, long-term care insurance. So you're almost penalized for taking steps to care for yourself. And a lot of people hold off on pursuing mental health services until they're already in pretty dire straits. So the first thing that's really important in transforming emotional health is really transforming the discussion around mental health from treatment to prevention. And there are lots of things that can be done that can help us become less vulnerable to emotional health challenges. I tend to think about wellness, emotional wellness, in terms of 3 pillars, almost like 3 legs of a stool. And if any of those legs is missing or off balance, the entire thing topples over. So that first leg is lifestyle. So what are those things that we're doing for ourselves to maintain wellness? The second pillar is biology. So is there anything physiologically going on that's impacting wellness? Something like 7 out of 8 Americans is considered metabolically unhealthy, which is just an insane statistic, and that influences our risk for things like Alzheimer's and other factors into the future. And then that last pillar really is around spirituality. So those deeper issues around identity, meaning, and purpose. So we can have a pristine lifestyle, we can take all the right supplements, take the right medications. But if you're not living a life that's truly in alignment with those highest values, then we'll still struggle. So those would be my kind of words of advice.
Truly appreciate that. Shifting right to the next question. This one has been brought up for Dr. Powell. What can Black professionals do to help their organizations create balance? And what can professionals do to encourage their organizations to focus and fund EDI efforts?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And I think it's so appropriate for this discussion. I think, first and foremost, I think this is a period of time where if leadership isn't paying attention to the ways that workplaces have shifted, the ways that society has shifted, for me, it is a personal question as to whether or not it's the right workplace for me. We see a lot of people making that decision and questioning those things in real time. The Great Resignation is a real thing. And it's not only about people feeling like maybe they're not paid enough, but people are making decisions based on wellness now, right? Based on the fact that I might not want to go into an office in the middle of a pandemic. I don't want to go back to the hustle and bustle of what my life used to be. I can be as productive, if not more valuable, to the people in my life and to myself by maintaining more homeostasis and stability for myself. But what's also very interesting to me is that people have sort of not really talked as much about the ways that microaggressions and the experience of being the only Black face in a white space may have been different and somewhat minimized by the fact that we actually get to work from a place that's comfortable for us right now. I think that that's a really important factor to talk about in this Great Resignation as well. And the fact that some people are resigning based on principles, based on morals and values and ethics that maybe their organization is not making great strides in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the first thing for me would be question whether this is the environment that's best for you, right? That is a privileged question to ask, and I recognize that. Not everyone has a multitude of career options, but do take the time to think about that. We're in a period of time that is a little bit malleable, and I do think we should challenge the systems and structures we sit within. And also because the Great Resignation is happening, this is an opportunity also to elevate the challenges that exist in a way that leadership may not have heard it a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think, finding the appropriate space to be bold and to be honest about what you are experiencing, what others on your team may be experiencing, the ways that perhaps being the only face, the only Black or brown face in a white space weighs heavily on you. I think this is the moment of time to do that if there were any. As far as equity, diversity, and inclusion, my company, the Equitas, this is what we do. We work on health equity, we work on operationalizing health equity, but we also challenge workplaces to embrace health equity beyond just this being a flash in the pan moment, that we must embrace equity, diversity, and inclusion internally as an important building block to pushing for health equity externally. I think once again, it's a question of what is going on with your leadership if they haven't started really thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, not only as something that's relevant in the discussion today, but something that's relevant to the future of the workforce and to the future of the workplace. I want to be cautious though, and also say explicitly, I don't believe that every single Black or brown person has to be a spokesperson for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is a very specific skill set that you either have or you don't. And you shouldn't pretend to have it if you don't have it, because you don't have to. There are other skills you bring to the table besides being Black, besides knowing the Black experience, and besides being the one who's able to perhaps hold a conversation about microaggressions and racism in the workplace. So I think setting boundaries around what role you actually want to play in perhaps helping to move your organization, further towards the destination of, or the journey towards the destination of equity, diversity, and inclusion, but recognize you don't have to be the one to do it, right? Just being Black doesn't qualify you alone and solely to be the voice of equity, diversity, and inclusion in your organization.
Amen, Dr. Powell. Amen. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we have about 2 to 3 more questions before we get to the guided visualization led by Dr. Peoples. The next question is actually for Dr. Peoples. As many of us know, this has been a tough year, really a tough 2 years, some even longer. Many of us are truly exhausted, and we are seeing many Black professionals leaving the EDI spaces. Any advice to those that are on the front line?
I would echo what Dr. Powell said about really setting limits on emotional labor. And I think especially for women, we tend to take on the work of keeping other people comfortable at the expense of our own well-being. And I think it's maybe a realization that's come with age, and it's a very liberating realization, but that's that I can't control someone else's emotional experience, and I can't control someone else's experience of me. What I can control is whether I'm operating in truth and integrity. I can deliver that truth in a way that honors our humanity, but how the other person chooses to receive that truth really is a reflection of where they are in their journey. So being able to let go of that has been very useful for me. And I think another thing that doesn't often get brought up is our financial health. So really being able to put yourself in a position where you're not beholden to a toxic environment. So I would say that there have been maybe 2 times in my life where I've walked away from a job without having anything lined up. And the only reason that was possible was because I did have enough of a savings, enough cushion to be able to make that decision. So I think a lot of times we stay stuck in toxic positions because of those financial fears. So really having that solid financial footing is also really important in terms of emotional peace of mind.
And here's the last question that came from an audience member. I think very impactful, and given time, I would ask that both of you give your last comment with this within a 30-second elevator pitch or so. Somebody mentioned, I often feel that whatever project I am on, I have to be absolutely perfect, or I am at risk of losing opportunities. I think the balance of that is also imposter syndrome, where a lot of us have that as well as the only sometime in this space. What advice would you leave us with to have that stop, or to really stop the habit of being so hard on ourselves?
I'm happy to jump in first. Thank you for your transparency and your honesty. I would say this is rooted in imposter syndrome, which is easier said than done to root out. It's something I'll be very honest about that I'm working on in myself as well. In recognizing that, I think as Dr. Peoples has said, our value is not solely tied to what we're able to do, to our manual labor, right? We have so much more value to offer. And I say that I think about this through the lens of my spirituality. Like, I'm very grounded in my faith, and I believe that my opportunities are not tied to what I can do alone. And so I lean into that, and I believe in doing my very best, and I believe that my best is good enough. And so I would encourage you to think more highly of what you bring to the table, and recognize perfection should never be our goal, because it's an impossible thing to attain.
And I would also echo that. So really striving toward excellence rather than perfection. So excellence is really driven from a place of love, So what is it that I can bring to this project? What is it that I can do to really improve the lives of the people that will be impacted by whatever it is that I'm doing as part of my work? Whereas when we are striving for perfection, that comes from a place of fear. How can I not mess this up? And when we are coming from that place of fear, the kind of range of possibilities narrows. So it's much less, we're much less capable of bringing our best selves into a situation when we are operating from that fearful place.
Absolutely. And with that, I actually will hand the floor back to you, Dr. Peoples, as you will help guide us through a visualization with the goal to realign with your higher self.
Thank you. So this is a visualization whose aim is to help us get back into alignment with who we truly are. This is the true core of our being. Some may refer to this as our higher self or inner wisdom. You may be someone who works very hard, is very committed and passionate about your work, but in this season, you find yourself not feeling valued or appreciated. Often this sense of longing, needing, comes when we've gotten out of alignment with who we truly are. When we've lost the supreme confidence in knowing the unique gifts that we alone can offer the world. When we're in this space, we often find ourselves seeking praise, encouragement, and validation from sources that are not capable of supplying what we need. When that supply is lacking, we begin to doubt our own abilities. We begin to think that we are not good enough. So we find ourselves doing more, not from a place of joy and abundance, but from a place of longing and lack, hoping desperately to get the validation that we desire. In seeking that validation, we find ourselves becoming someone that we are not, shifting, twisting, contorting, trying to fit ourselves into the narrow box of expectation that was never designed for us. Is it any wonder that we feel inadequate when we do not fit? In this moment, I invite you to reflect on who you truly are, that special spark that makes you uniquely you. And if you haven't done so already, I invite you to come to a comfortable seated position with both feet planted firmly on the ground. And if it feels comfortable, you may close your eyes. Now I invite you to focus your awareness on your breath, breathing in and breathing out at a pace that feels comfortable to you. With each inhale, imagine breathing in clarity and contentment. And with each exhale, imagine breathing out any tension or stress. We'll just stay here for a few moments, breathing in and breathing out, relaxing into our inner selves. And as you're breathing, I invite you to focus your attention even deeper. What is the voice of your higher self bringing into awareness in this moment? What are the desires of your heart? What is it that brings you joy? I invite you to bring to mind the people, places, situations, past or present, that have been your sources of comfort, peace, and clarity. Allow yourself to settle into the warmth and deliciousness that these gifts have brought into your life. I invite you to spend a few moments reflecting on the ways that your life has shifted because of their presence, giving gratitude for their special place in your life. Thankful that each conversation, each experience, each new adventure has shaped the person that you are and is molding the person that you are becoming. Breathing in and breathing out. Now I invite you to reflect on the gifts that your presence has offered the world. If we understand the workings of the universe, we know that we must become the gift that we want to receive. What is that special spark that you alone bring into the world? Giving gratitude for the gift of this wild and precious life. taking comfort in hearing the words of the Creator, that you are dearly beloved, and in you I am well pleased. As we rest in this moment, rejoice in knowing that you are enough. Breathing in and breathing out, feeling perfectly calm, perfectly at peace, and feeling perfectly pleased with ourselves. Breathing in and breathing out. Now I'd like you to bring your awareness back into your body. You can start to wiggle your toes or move your fingers. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.
I think I'm ready. Dr. Peoples, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Oh, man. Thank you, thank you. Dr. Powell, thank you. With that, that concludes this phenomenal session. A couple of items and notes prior to leaving. For all those who are out there, all participants, please note that the booth is still open, the electronic booth that is, of voting. You can vote up until 5 p.m. today. I've been told that we have 1,000+ members at NACI, and our goal is to get every and as many people to vote to be the highest voting turnout that we've ever had. So please be sure to vote and continue to use your vote and certainly go from there. Also tomorrow, we continue and encourage people to stay with our sessions. There is another session after this, I believe, for the Young Professional Forum. And then tomorrow we also have the Leading Through Crisis, Management Perspectives from the Frontline, where you'll be joined by speakers from Ochsner, DSS, and Johns Hopkins. Thank you once again for joining this phenomenal virtual conference. Thank you once again, Dr. Peoples and Dr. Powell, and I will see you all next time. Take care.
Okay.